And welcome everyone. We're so happy to have you with us and in many cases have you back with us. As Raisa mentioned, this is the 10th session of our COVID conversations. And in fact, our very first was with Dr. Goswami as well. And that was some 3 months ago. These have proven to be a really wonderful forum for us to share. And this is us being the SBCC Foundation to share some of the work that happens at Santa Barbara City College that many people in the community may not have an opportunity to see firsthand. So I think the reputation of the college as a national leader is well known, but don't get to see unless you're in a classroom as a student or you work with the college, you may not get to see some of the wonderful work that happens here. So we've been able to use this forum over these last few months of the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders and all the things that have come with it as a way to share a lot of that. So we're very grateful for you and your interest in this. Today, again, we have a broad mix of community from the campus itself. We have faculty, staff, administration from the campus. We have donors and supporters from the broader community. And of course, there are some very hot topics that we're going to cover today with Dr. Goswami. So by way of introduction, I'll simply say we have with us our new leader, Dr. Utpal Goswami joined us in January of 2020. He comes to us after 30 years of work in our community colleges, both in and out of California. And we are very grateful to have him here. He, of course, stepped into a world that none of us could have expected and has been critical in helping the college to navigate that. So today we're going to talk about three primary areas with Dr. Goswami. The first will be the outlook for fall. We know that this is on a lot of people's minds, whether you are a teacher yourself or an employee with the campus, or whether you are a parent of young children and students, or you are a community member wondering about the economic future of what's going to happen. All of us are curious about what our educational system is going to do to try and navigate. So we're going to talk about that first. We're going to have a conversation after Dr. Goswami's remarks. We'll ask and answer some questions, and then we'll go on to our other two topics, which are all interrelated, of course. But the next will be our budget. That's been certainly in the news. The budget impacts from the current situation are affecting everyone, and the college is no different. And then finally, enrollment and what that looks like going forward. We'll then just generally have a conversation about what these impacts might be for higher education in general. And we'll try to do that all in 45 to 60 minutes. So with that, no further ado, I'm very happy to welcome back Dr. Utpal Goswami, Superintendent President of Santa Barbara City College.
Thank you, Jeff, and certainly thank you for giving me the opportunity to connect with the community. As I indicated in my last forum, I was barely here when we shut down, so I really haven't had a chance to go out to the community and meet people. So this is a good opportunity for me to connect, I guess, virtually with members of the community and talk a little bit about SBCC. So one of the first thing, of course, you had mentioned is what is the outlook for fall? That is, at this point, is a $64,000 question because nobody really knows what's going to happen in 4 to 6 weeks. When we initially started planning for fall, our thought process was that we will go through the first wave of the COVID, and then we'll enter into a lull, which will be around July, August, September. And then perhaps it's going to spike up again with the flu season. So that's the basis by which we made our plans for the fall. So our plan was, clearly we knew that we could not have all our classes in an in-person format. We also knew that not all classes, not all students do well in an online environment. So we wanted to do a balance, of in-person instruction, face-to-face, and online classes. So our schedule, if you look at our schedule now, you'll see almost 85% of our classes are online, but about 15% of our classes are scheduled to be face-to-face or in-person. And those are, the kind of classes where you do better if you're in a classroom environment, whether it's a lab or you have the interaction with the faculty member. So that is the plan. Of course, to be able to start on August 24th in a face-to-face environment, first thing that needs to happen is we need to have clearance from the public health department, which means we need to be at level 4. in the reopening scheme of things. What has happened over the last 2 weeks makes that questionable, that things will improve significantly between now and end of August, that we might get to a situation where we might be able to open. The other thing is we have been really looking or waiting to see guidance from either the governor's office or the chancellor's office regarding higher education, and that's one area where I think there has been a reluctance to offer any kind of guidance. So we are having to develop our own rules and metrics by which we may or may not do certain things, and that is making it very difficult. So the plan, as I indicated, that I shared, is that we will try to open face-to-face, but if you're not unable to open face-to-face, then we will, of course, convert all the classes that were scheduled to be in person to the online format. I have been having conversations with faculty leadership that if it turns out that sometime in September we get the all clear to have online classes, and so faculty members determine that here are some classes that might do well by moving to a face-to-face format for a few weeks, we might do that. So we will still leave the door open that at certain points in time, if it is safe, we may convert some classes to face-to-face. But regardless, 85% of our classes will be online. I've been in contact with some students, and they have also expressed interest that at some point in time they would like to come to campus. So we are having to balance the need for public health and what's good for our students. So that's our plan for the fall. Clearly, by the time we anticipate the second peak that might come because of the flu season, which will be late October, early November, that might be a very difficult period for us because we will have a lot of students who will be sick, maybe a lot of staff members and faculty members who will be sick, and we wouldn't know whether or not they're really a COVID-19 case or it is an influenza case. So that is uncharted territory for us, and we'll have to navigate that when the time comes. But we will be putting safety protocols in place to make sure that we keep our employees and students safe. Jeff, did I cover?
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of questions that I know you get regularly and we get as well. The faculty in classroom question is always the first, but of course the campus itself has a large staff, support staff, and administrative leaders in all manner, both inside and outside the classroom. And do you have the ability to share a bit about what that looks like for the fall as far as administrative staff, for those who are primarily not in the classroom, but
Sure.
Not, there'll be a presence on campus, whether the campus will be quote unquote open?
So if we have physical, in-person classes here, of course, there will be some staff member who will be required to come here so that we can prepare the campus for students. But services will remain online. So even though we may have some staff come to campus, the services that they'll provide will remain online. So there will be no physical in-person services provided in campus. So the financial aid will still be handled remotely. Advising, counseling will also happen remotely, and everything else that you can think about that we do will remain remote throughout the fall semester. But if we are open physically, then of course there will be some people who will be, who will need to come here so that we can prep the campus for students.
Thank you for that. I know the other question that often comes up, the campus is used by the general public in many ways, seen as a community resource beyond the educational mission. And I wonder if you can share anything about what the outlook for access to the campus might be for, community members walking their dogs and using our track and athletic facilities, the things that the community counts on Santa Barbara City College for.
So right now the campus is open. People can walk in and drive in and park anywhere and walk their dogs. In fact, when I bring my dog every once in a while to walk, I see lots of people in the afternoon, enjoying the ocean breeze and open spaces. The only place that we is locked is our gym and the field, and that is because of we don't want people to congregate in one space, and it's a bit difficult for us to monitor the track in terms of congregation. So that's why it's not open. But at some point in time, if we go to a level 4 in the reopening scheme, then we'll open it up for the community.
It's come up in recent conversations, not just, in fact, probably not even primarily with Santa Barbara City College, but broader in our educational sphere, certainly in our K-12 districts, the question of what resources teachers, primarily teachers, have in their abilities to continue to figure out how to best pivot what they do. And of course, we've had a number of people on this program. In this forum, we've had Matt Mooney here, who talked a lot about sort of his expertise and how you do remote learning and distance learning, what technology tends to work. You adapt what you've done for years as maybe a live classroom educational presentation to something remote. How do you interact with students in a remote set? We have the fabulous FRC, which many people on these sessions have heard, the Faculty Resource Center at Santa Barbara City College. But we started to hear requests for that kind of support more broadly, and even more support like that. Do you have any sense, maybe you can speak to what you've heard from faculty, as well as any plans or opportunities you see to offer resources for teachers as they try to figure out, especially for those for whom this is new, try to figure out how best to teach in a remote environment as long as this may last?
Yeah, let me for the sake of for information for the community, one of the things we do at Santa Barbara City College is we don't just tell a faculty member, go and teach online class. We don't assign online class just like that. We have specific requirements for training requirements for faculty that they must complete before they're allowed to teach online classes. So our online training program is generally considered one of the industry best practices. And what that has done, if you look at the positive of COVID, is that there were some faculty who were always interested in online teaching, so they were in there, they were always teaching at least some part of their load online. But a significant number of other faculty now, because of necessity, are having to explore online teaching. But when they're doing that, they're also having to reflect on how they teach in a different medium. So that has given them the opportunity to kind of reflect on their craft of teaching and reflect on what they've been doing in the past and how it connected to students and how I can connect to students in a different medium. So I would say this will allow or incentivize or spark among our faculty a new interest in how they connect with students, how they structure their classes. So one of the things that happened with online teaching is that you no longer think of your classes in terms of either 50 minutes or 75 minutes, because that is not the case in online. So you have to teach differently. You have to think about how you structure your lesson plans or instructions differently. You try to prioritize what part of the learning process is where the instructor is going to be most beneficial, and what part of the learning process you can leave it to students so that they can put forward some of their effort also. So in the sense that this will lead to kind of a rethinking about what is teaching and what is the most important part of teaching. And I have a feeling that as we learn from this, we will improve on delivery of our instructional material, because we will have found out ways to focus more time on what is important, and also make students collaborators in the learning process. Now going back to your question about significant interest from other teachers. I have been in touch with the county school superintendent regarding making some of our options of software training available to K-12 teachers, and we will pursue that when the time comes.
Great, thank you. Again, it's one more way in which I know the community looks to SBCC as a broader resource. So I know there's a lot of appreciation for that. Related to that, what about the idea or the ongoing need for individual tutoring and support? It's something that the college provides in the course of what we might have once called normal business. And I know that some of our previous guests, Matt Mooney included, have referenced the ways in which they connect to students, as did our art faculty and a few others. Will there be additional individual or group tutoring resources for students who might struggle with an online format, and how are we thinking about that as a campus?
Yes, so we have not only our tutors available online, but also we have contracts with a number of I would say a couple of companies perhaps regarding providing online tutoring. So by having those contracts, we can provide tutoring in subjects for which we may not find tutors. So students can sign up for tutoring at no cost, whether it's through our tutors or through one of the contracted services.
We've got a couple of questions coming in on this front, so I want to toss two out there, Dr. Goswami. One is, can you offer some clarification on when you were thinking through with the academic leadership which courses would be prioritized for online or rather for in-person learning if possible? Was it all lab courses? Was it primarily CTE courses? How did you look through that and try to decide which handful of courses might be prioritized for in-person if it's possible?
Actually, I didn't make the decision. I just gave it to the faculty leadership, especially the department chairs and our vice president, to talk through which will be the courses that will be most beneficial for students. So clearly, courses that made the cut are courses that require face-to-face interaction and physical touching of either equipment or materials. That's why we have some of the lab classes, some of the CTE classes, but we also have some general education classes because as I mentioned, a lot of students don't do very well in an online format. So yes, they have the opportunity to do majority of their English classes online, but students who may not be doing very well or who think they won't do very well in online format, they can sign up for some of those general education classes also. So we try to do a balance. And the thing is, we could have done a whole lot more in terms of face-to-face classes, but there is a cost to it because in maintaining social distancing and our classes will become smaller. To allow for cleaning, we'll have to have time periods between consecutive classes. So those things add up, costs add up pretty quickly. So we had to balance the fiscal part of it with the student need part of it. And ultimately, the decision to open or not on August 24th online with a face-to-face format will be dependent on what we'll have received from the county in terms of guidance. And we'll also have a discussion with the board at the retreat, which is coming up on the 27th. And the board has been very supportive, and I thank the board for supporting me in quickly shifting from one position to another based on new information that comes about.
Certainly. All right. Well, I want to ask you one more specific, and then perhaps we can talk a bit about our other connected topics of budget and longer-term enrollment trends. But one of our well-recognized flagship programs for the college has been our nursing program, and it has been communicated to the community that there will not be a new cohort coming in this fall. Can you talk a bit about what we can expect with respect to our nursing program, given the limitations of the remote environment?
Yes, I think one of the dispensations we will get is that even though there may be prohibition regarding on in-person instruction, nursing fire academies, police academies will be exempted. So therefore, we will continue our nursing program the way we had intended. So, and then we'll pick up a cohort later on, perhaps in the spring. So yes, nursing is something that is likely to continue in the format that we have already established.
So there may be a pause on new students coming in, but we're hoping for some
temporary pause. Yes.
Okay. So maybe this is a good time to talk a little bit. I mean, this is primarily about the constraints of the pandemic, but of course, budget is a major factor here, and some of that is derivative of the pandemic. We know that the state of California is facing potentially $54 billion budget deficit over the next couple of years. We've heard a number of different proposals. People that followed might have seen the legislature's proposal, then the governor's May revise budget proposal, and then ultimately heard that there was an agreement reached.
Yes.
Still waiting to see what Washington, D.C. does. The HEROES Act passed out of the House, but of course the Senate is now looking at it piece by piece and considering what to move forward. So there's still a lot of unknown. But I know the college and the district have received some, it's hard to say good news, but considering how low the bar was set, relatively good news after the governor and the legislature in California reached agreement. Can you say a little bit about what we're looking at? I know you've had to juggle different orders of magnitude of budget deficit projections, and I think a lot of folks are interested in kind of where we stand now.
So when it came to the budget, I think the entire institution went through gyrations of scenarios, and to the extent that we almost ended up getting whiplash from going from one extreme to the other extreme. So at one point in time, I mean, to be clear, the budget constraints is because of two reasons. One is, of course, there will be declining revenue from the state, so as a result, we'll be funded less. And the other was, significant, at least some part of our non-resident students, because of COVID, is not going to enroll, at least in the fall. So that is a second reason as to why our budget is declining, our revenue source is declining. So the question was, by how much? So at some point in time, it almost looked like we will end up with a $8 to $10 million deficit. That thankfully has been averted because of the agreement that was reached between the legislature and the governor. So the tentative budget that was presented to the board in end of June, we are looking at a deficit of about $2.3 million. And that, in spite of the declining revenue, we made significant headway in terms of reducing our deficits. So just to give an example, for 1920, our adopted budget is about $4.7 million in deficit. So in spite of declining revenue, we are trying to bring it down to balance. So this year, 2021, we are looking at about $2.3 million deficit in the general fund. And that has been helped by a couple of things. Some of the expenditures that we are incurring because of COVID-19 is going to be covered through the CARES Act federal money. And then last week, we also received news that we will get a kind of a block grant from the state that will cover some of those COVID-related expenses. So that has helped our budget picture a little bit from the terrible to, we can ride this out and utilize our reserves in a prudent way. And I shared with the board a 5-year projection. And as I made the commitment that we will try to bring the budget to balance. So we are looking at one more year of deficit. And from that point on, we will have a balanced budget or a surplus. So that's roughly where we are in terms of our budgeting scenario. It is not as bad as we thought it could have been, but it certainly is tight. And one of the hidden part of this deficit is that the state covered their shortfall of $54 billion by deferring a lot of payments to community colleges. So we will probably get deferrals of about $10 to $11 million next year. That means that's the money that the state was supposed to pay us, but they will not for at least 3 or 4 months later. So we'll have to cover those deferrals from our internal funds, from our reserves. And we have sufficient reserves at hand to be able to do that. There will be many districts which do not have such kind of that amount of reserves. They will have to go out in the market and borrow funds to be able to meet payroll. We are not in that situation, and we won't be.
Well, a couple of questions here, maybe to tie these last two issues together. First of all, when we think about costs, I certainly have been part of and witnessed to conversations around the adaptations that the college is considering to the pandemic and the remote learning. You know, there are places where it seems it would save money, and there's places where it certainly would cost more. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's a net number in there somewhere that we're trying to figure out. But can you speak to the differences in cost of doing an all remote semester versus what was considered a normal in-person semester? And then maybe a few more questions are coming in around other adaptations, but maybe for that of what do we think the net result of the current situation will be from a budget perspective due to the pandemic?
Actually, it will be an increase in cost. We will certainly have some reduced cost. We can think some of the obvious ones like utilities will use less electricity, less power and all that stuff. We will have less need for hourly workers because the campus is closed. So those are some of the areas where you save dollars. On the other hand, your training costs go up. Your cost for cleaning and maintaining our facilities go up. So overall, because of COVID-19, our cost will go up on a per student basis.
So on that note, a couple of things, there's ways that, of course, the campus generally measures what is an effective course. Can we get enough enrollment to sustain a particular course or series of courses? Does the pandemic change any of that? Do we know what the minimum enrollment is going to need to be for a standard course so that it remains on the schedule? And does it change at all with the pandemic? How do we look at that?
We haven't really, I haven't stressed the need to change that. In fact, we are actually signing off on smaller classes because we think those classes are needed, and because of social distancing, the classes will be smaller. So no, we are not changing our scenario for class making or not making. But that will be a subject of discussion long term in terms of our long run financial strategy. So I do not want to confuse the short term issues with with COVID with our long term strategy. So that will be a part of a separate conversation about what should be our optimal class size and things of that sort. But right now, clearly some of the classes we are signing off on are actually smaller than they used to be in the past.
We're getting some questions in the chat. Norma Bahena, Valerie Ellis, Helen Wong, Jean Kaplan have all been offering some good, and I've been working them into our conversation, but there are a couple here around non-credit and School of Extended Learning I just want to put out there. One is, does this have an impact on non-fee based classes for a School of Extended Learning? Because they're not generating fees, is there a different impact when you're looking at a budget that is this impacted, or is that not relevant to the decision?
No, the non-fee based courses, they still get apportionment from the state on the non-credit formula. So whether they, we will offer all the classes for which students sign up. What we're finding is for some classes, we're actually having greater student interest, and for some classes, less student interest. So non-credit offerings will entirely depend on whether our students are willing to take those classes or not. So we have not cut funding for non-credit classes.
And then with respect to admissions and registration, given that the current environment is definitely new to some folks and for some more challenging than others, is there a plan to have our admissions office or anyone else offer assistance for people to figure out how to sign up and register when they're not able to go talk to someone in person as they might have once been? This is particularly for I think the actual question is with the non-credit side, but just in general, are we thinking about those kinds of adaptations?
Certainly not in person, but we are having a relook at our phone tree to see, how we can utilize our staff in the best possible way, so that we can address needs of community members who would like to get assistance from a live person. One of the things, and we had the discussion just a couple of days back, one of the things we are exploring is the possibility that we might assign certain times to people who need help, so that they can be helped at the particular time. So they may not be able to get help at the time that they call, but we may be able to set up a different time at which we can help them. So we are looking at all the possibilities as to how to effectively serve our community. But again, we have staffing limitations, and so just like in a office environment, or in the weeks leading to enrollment, starting off class, you have a queue of students, and they wait half an hour, 45 minutes to talk to somebody. Similar in the phone system, also there will be some delay, and we are trying to figure out how best to utilize that, utilize our staff to provide service without significant delay.
Great, thank you.
And I know that one of the issues with non-credit enrollment was the cumbersome form that we had. So I think we're in the process of, I think we have already deployed a more simpler form that I think our community members will find much more user-friendly.
Great. So I do want to move to enrollment in a moment, but there's a couple of questions here that I think are good to toss out. So Sally Sangers has asked, we've spent a lot of time talking about what is safe and what is not as the science and the study of the virus has developed, and of course it's emerging in every sphere. The outdoor spacing is generally preferable. Sally's question is, have we thought about having outdoor facility, whether it be tents or more room outdoors, if in fact that is a better way to adapt? Also, not to mention the fact that some facilities don't have heating and cooling in the way that one might hope. So are we looking at that? I know many people are familiar with the mysterious tent on campus, but
yes. I mean, certainly we have thought about larger spaces, and then some of our plans involve utilizing some of our larger spaces that are not typically used for classrooms. So we are aware of that, and then there has been some talks about some faculty may teach classes outdoors. But again, all of that, to be able to do that, first we have to get the green light to be able to do that. So we cannot do it by ourselves. So yes, faculty will have the freedom to go to outdoor spaces and teach. But we are not, because the number of classes we're talking about right now is not that many. We haven't gone there yet in terms of a long-term strategy. But if we have to do more of this in the spring, we will certainly have to think about other options.
Well, I wasn't going to mention spring, but since you did, no, we'll leave spring alone for now.
Let's leave spring for the timing, because I'm up to here in terms of this fall.
Absolutely.
Everybody is.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it sort of longer term in just a moment, but one more question from faculty, and I've heard this on campus, and I've read carefully what you've put out, and you've been very communicative about, as things have shifted, letting folks know the new realities. But for faculty that are right now struggling to adapt and figure out when will they know whether they particularly are going to be in the classroom or not, I think I recall an August 14th.
Yes, I think I have internally set a clock for myself that we need to definitely know one way or another by August 14th.
All right, so everyone heard that August 14th is the absolute date, and I know that everyone would love to know sooner if possible, but.
Yeah, well, if the state tells us on August 2nd that now there's no way you're going to go in person, then we'll know August 2nd or 3rd. Right. But if we have to make a decision and the decision is left to us, it will be August 14th, latest.
All right. All right, so with the time we have remaining, and we're still open to questions certainly, but I do want to take a look at the enrollment trends. I mean, some of the things, folks that follow this, and there have certainly been things written in local press, there have been conversations at the board level. We have these competing trends. On one hand, an online-only environment has incentivized some students to kind of sit it out for the time being. We're certainly hearing about this in more expensive four-year universities. On the other hand, recessions tend to incentivize spikes in enrollment, traditionally in community colleges, because people are either out of work or looking to stay employed or upgrading their skills. And then, of course, we have the economic impact of just loss of income due to the pandemic. So with all of these, I know we're trying to figure out what is the net result, and are we planning for an increased enrollment, a decreased enrollment, a stasis? And I know in conversations with you, Dr. G, that we've talked about it's different for different student populations. So maybe you could share a bit about what you're seeing and what we're anticipating is with the information we have now.
So we have been looking at our enrollment, and our plan was that for in-state students, resident students, we will be pretty much at our capacity and no more. So certainly no growth. So we'll pretty much stay level, or maybe a few additional students. And right now, since open enrollment started on July 6th, that number is creeping up. So we are still thinking that we will be somewhere around where we thought we were going to be in terms of resident students. Non-resident students, we had projected about roughly 20 to 30% decline, and especially international students, we are looking at a 30% decline. And some of the numbers in terms of students who are already in the country, who are here, students who are planning to take classes, because a number of our international students are also planning to take their classes from their home country. And then a number of new I-20s that we have issued still puts us around the 30% decline mark. We'll have to see in the next 2 to 3 weeks to see whether the enrollment actually happens. So the decline that we're concerned about is basically the decline in non-resident tuition. If we have a slight decline in, if we don't hit our target exactly in resident students, because of our 3-year averaging, it is not a huge impact for the college. But for non-resident revenue, those are direct bottom line effect to the institution. So that's the enrollment we are most watching carefully. And we will see, right now it's still trending to about 30% decline that we have been projecting, and more than likely it's going to stay there. So that's all I can say at this point.
Are we working with our transfer institutions? At least of course, there's many students transfer to all institutions, really all over the country and beyond. But for those that we have a really robust relationship with, UCSB, Cal State, Northridge, as well as Channel Islands, others that a large number of our students transfer to, are we talking with them about the impact of what's happening for us, what's happening for them, and how that might affect transfer pathways at this point?
We are not, because all of these things happen before at a time period where we could not impact the transfer cycle that took place in May or June. So certainly we could not impact whatever is going to happen in terms of transfers for year 2020. But we can certainly we will have discussions regarding transfer prospects for year 21. because we know what might happen between now and May or June of 2021, where students may be short of some courses, or students may not be able to complete some courses. So those are some conversations we will initiate. But right now, no, we are just finishing up the 2020 cycle, and it happened right at the time where the transfer cycle was going on, so we really couldn't impact that much. But certainly, there is a plan to have the conversations, and I think that has to be mostly not just SBCC conversations. It has to be a system-wide conversation, because I can see a lot of students who were on the transfer track who will be short some courses.
Let me just share this with folks. Not everyone may realize that SBCC actually peaked in enrollment about 10, 11 years ago.
Yes.
In the wake of the last recession. In 09-10, we actually had our peak enrollment, and we've been declining ever since. And that's occasionally made the papers. And of course, it has a budget impact. It also has a community impact with respect to housing and other things that are always intertwined with the college size. And yet folks may not realize we're about 30% smaller now than we were then. Mm-hmm. Talk about declines or increases in enrollment, we're talking about from the current point, which is actually 30% smaller than a decade ago.
That's right.
When you look at that long-term trends, and I know this is a lot of what you and the leadership of the college and the trustees look at, is sort of trying to predict enrollment trends over time and capacity. Obviously, the pandemic is one factor. But before that, if we can all remember, before mid-March of this year, there was a lot of focus on community colleges as the future of higher ed, and in fact, a great potential growth in community colleges relative to other kinds of higher education. What do you see in the long-term future with respect to enrollment, not just in the pandemic context, but just broadly with community colleges?
I'd probably address more from the perspective of SBCC, because SBCC is positioned in a somewhat a unique environment, because Santa Barbara is a destination city. So one of the facts of higher education is that your costs will go up every year. So if you are not able to grow, you end up what I call cannibalizing institution to survive. And I would prefer SBCC doesn't go there. So we adopt a strategy by which we look for an optimal size that we get to maintain our preeminence in terms of being one of the top community colleges in the country. So to me, our enrollment at SBCC is not simply a matter of what happens around us and we just accept demographic changes. I think we're in a position to drive what we want. And that's the conversation we need to have with the board, and I will have with the board when we talk about a long-term vision for the institution. Because if we take the position that we'll just accept what comes our way, then SBCC will be a very different institution compared to if we strategically put out that these are the markers we want to hit so that we can be doing these kind of things in the future. So it's a good question. I don't think, especially for folks who are not too tuned into college matters, the answer may seem a little bit wishy-washy, but that's where we are. That my point is that SBCC is a unique institution that we can actually try and control our destiny. Right. Through some strategic choices that we make.
Yeah. Well, in the time we have left, obviously there's another overlayer to the moment we're in, and it has everything to do with the country once again reckoning with its racial past. It certainly has been a factor within the college, and it's certainly been something that's been raised at various points as either a question or a criticism. What do you see the future engagement with the college as from the leadership perspective? How do we as a college community reckon with this? And how do we take a look at our own internal equality or inequalities? How do power structures work? How do decisions get made? How do we talk about inclusion? I know that's not an easy question, but and I know it's something that is constantly on the minds of the leadership. And I was wondering if you would maybe address a bit about how you see that as we navigate the moment that we're in.
I think the board recently adopted Resolution 18 that has a number of elements that will kind of point us to what we need to do. And we'll start right from the top in the sense that we will evaluate all our policies, board policies and procedures and administrative procedures from the lens of equity. So we will start there. Second is, as I have indicated in my previous comments to the board, that we will look at equity from the perspective of things that we can control. We can certainly discuss matters that are societal in nature, and we can contribute to those things, our little part, but our time will be, and our resources and our talents will be much better utilized if we focus on the things that we alone control and then we alone can solve. So that's why, removing the difference in success between different groups would be a significant part of our efforts towards reducing or eliminating the gaps.
Well, I know for many that work within the community college system and education as a whole, particularly public education, it sort of goes without saying that access to quality education is in itself an equity issue. And of course, the community colleges are key to that, and they are by far the most accessible institution of higher education in our state, in our country. Mm-hmm. I just want to acknowledge that Ben Romo put it in the chat just now that just it's important to say that out loud, that access to the college itself is an equity issue. And so his comment is just appreciating the growth. He's framing it as a growth mindset, but certainly just an accessibility priority for all of our communities. So
yes, I think that's where SBCC promise is a huge component in providing access. And I certainly thank the community for supporting that, because that has enabled open doors for many students who probably would not have come to SBCC otherwise.
Well, I appreciate everything that you shared, Dr. Goswami. I know we packed a lot into about 50 minutes here, but I do want to give you the floor for any final comments. I know you're going to do a town hall next week.
Yes.
So there'll be other opportunities. And of course, with the shifting landscape, everyone is, I believe at this point, 4 months in, is having to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and the notion that from day to day, these things shift and the best laid plans might have to change. So would invite you to just share anything that you'd like our audience today to know.
I think what we'll be doing is that we have to not let the pandemic detract us from what we do in terms of long-term planning. So one of the things we will engage in starting this fall is thinking about the long picture of SBCC, what we'd like to be, where we'd like to be, and how will we get there. So those conversations we must have, and we cannot let the pandemic or anything else detract us from that. So the fact that we cannot meet in person probably will make it a little bit more difficult to have those conversations, but we will initiate those conversations so that we all can contribute to what SBCC is. I mean, I would like to remind folks that what SBCC is today is because what people planned 30 years back. So what you're seeing here is the imprint of people who led this institution and provided insights as to what we should be. So similarly, we have an obligation to think about what SBCC is going to be 20 or 30 years from now, and try to position the institution towards that direction. So my intent is to have those conversations, not just with the board, but also with the college community and with the community at large, because we are part of the community, and we would like to be a resource and the asset to the community.
Well, thank you very much on behalf of the foundation and all of the community that is here behind the college and your leadership. We appreciate you spending some time. Dr. Utpal Goswami, our Superintendent President for Santa Barbara City College. And I hate to make predictions, but something tells me we're gonna do this again with you in the not too distant future. So we hope you're willing to come back.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
So I will just thank everyone for being part of today. As Raisa said at the front end, this is something that we do regularly. We have one more scheduled for July 30th with our athletics leadership. We'll talk about that, and then we're going to look into August, September. And we, like everyone, will make adjustments based on how things are looking for us at that moment. So put July 30th on your calendars, please. If you missed this or part of it or want to share it with a friend, this will be edited and posted within the next day or so on our website, sbccfoundation.org. And again, on behalf of all of us at the college and the foundation, thank you so much for your support of our work. And we all will navigate this together. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.